Welcome, everyone. I'm Andrew Stuck. I'm one of the co-producers of Walk, Listen, Create. Now, Walk, Listen, Create is a not-for-profit. We have a community of about 2,500 contributing creatives who either make work through walking or have created work to be experienced on foot. And what we're going to try and do with this series is to bring some of those artists to tell us about what they do and how they make it happen. We're particularly interested, obviously, in those artists who've undertaken pilgrimages or created their own pilgrimages or are considering people who are pilgrims. What we're looking at too is we're looking at trying to develop some pilgrimage resources. So we've created a collection in our archive, which anyone can access, and you'll be able to see, if you click on the pilgrimage resources collection, you'll be able to see all the different works of art, videos, all sorts of things that have been created by our community around pilgrimage. Now, I'm co-hosting this with a lovely person called Lora Aziz, and how the format of the event will go, Lora is going to be introducing herself in a minute, so she'll be able to tell you a little bit about herself and about the World Trails Network, for which she is the co-chair of their Arts and Culture Task Force. So get ready for that. It's quite a long mouthful. Then we're going to invite our panelists to say a few words about themselves, and then we're going to go straight into the presentations. Now, if there's a point of clarity after they've spoken about one of their presentations or one of the presentations, then we might invite them to answer that straight away if you pop that in the chat. But otherwise, what we'd hope to do is have 3 presentations and then followed by a panel discussion that Lora will be chairing. And then after a few minutes, we'll open it up to the audience, and I'll be looking out for people who put something in the chat about a question or opinion or an option. I mentioned 3 panelists. We advertised we were going to have 4. We heard only very recently that Simon Coleman, because of personal reasons and also because of difficulties of flying from Australia to the UK at the moment, he's actually going to be in transit while this event was to be run. So he's not able to join us for this event, but we're running, this is a series. We're going to have an event every month, first Tuesday of the month for 6 months. So we're going to be inviting Simon back on a different event. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Lora, and the show will get going. Lora.
Right, I'm Lora. I'm Lora Aziz, and I'm a cultural producer and artist, working across environmental practice, public space, and long-term place-based development. I'm currently working on Blue Steps Along the Saffron Trail, which is a 71-mile project exploring rivers and access and culture in Essex. And more widely, I'm co-chair of the Arts and Culture Task Force for the World Trails Network, which is a global membership network that connects trail organisations, land managers, and governments to support sustainable trail development and responsible access to landscapes. In that role, I'm working with Ali Pretty, who's in the room, my fellow co-chair, and where we're looking at how creative practice and cultural strategy can strengthen trail identity, environmental stewardship, inclusion worldwide, connectivity in creative ways. Across all of my work, I'm interested in climate justice, migration, water systems, and in building collaborations between artists, ecologists, local authorities, and communities to support long-term change, environmental and cultural change. And this pilgrimage series came about as part of the task force lists of things to get stuck into, and what a pleasure it is to bring pilgrimage to the forefront with Andrew and the network of Walk, Listen, Create. So I'm super excited to kickstart the first of our 6-month series. So hopefully, if you are enthused by tonight's session, may we see you first Tuesday of every month for the next 6 months, and we can be a cohort and discuss the beauties of pilgrimage. So onwards we go. So I'm going to pass on to András, who introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Laura. My name is András Molnár. I'm based in Budapest, Hungary, and one of my jobs is being an associate professor at the University of Pannonia, which is in the city of Veszprém. It's the Midwest of Hungary. You might have heard about that city because it used to be a few years ago the cultural capital of Hungary or Europe, sorry. And now it is the sport region of Europe this year. And in Budapest, I'm a senior researcher at the Research Institute for Computer Science. I work with GIS, Geographical Information Systems, and also very closely related trails, of course, any kind of trails, hiking trails mostly, and also pilgrimages. I study theology and I will graduate this summer. And I'm also a counselor and a coach, so I deal with people one-to-one. And I'm a member of the World Trails Network too. I used to be co-chairing the sustainability task team and then the knowledge task team. And now I handed that over, and we have founded a new initiative, which I will talk about. It's called the Trailology Collective. So that's in brief about myself.
Maybe we could pass over to Kathryn.
Hi, everyone, and greetings from Berkeley, California. I'm professor of art history and religion at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, and my career has kind of oscillated between museums and academia. So I came here after having a position at the National Gallery of Art. I've also worked at the Yale Center for British Art in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm the author of 2 books on pilgrimage, particularly pilgrimage in the arts, so souvenirs and objects and landscapes that have been created after someone goes on a journey that they consider sacred. And I have a new critical anthology coming out really soon. I'm excited. We've just been offered a contract, and it brings together 25 folks who are both academics and artists to look at contemporary art as a pilgrimage process. So making and meaning as a pilgrimage in and of itself, and also how contemporary art can function as a pilgrimage site. And those people come from various global perspectives. In addition to this, I'm also the director of a project called the Berkeley Art and Interreligious Pilgrimage Project, which is an evolving initiative that I launched in 2022, and it features pilgrimage routes, mostly created by socially engaged contemporary artists and scholars. It also serves as a hub of West Coast pilgrimage scholarship resources. We're interdisciplinary and collaborative, and our advisory board has people from a diversity of religious backgrounds, areas of expertise in academia, healthcare, and the arts. And our real priority is to kind of link sacred landscapes the world over to neighborhoods, gardens, and backyards, a dynamic way to connect as a global community, and also for spiritual healing and even, in some cases, physical recovery. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Hello, I guess it's me. Yeah, so I'm Guy Hayward. I'm co-founder and director of the British Pilgrimage Trust, which we founded in 2014. I've been leading guided pilgrimage since 2016, so like 10 years, 12 years now, this project. And what we're trying to do is trying to create this movement towards bring your own beliefs pilgrimage, and pilgrimage is a kind of creative act. And so therefore you create your own meaning, and it's through intention that you can set off the journey. And I think with this we've grown to do various things as a website, mainly as a website, but also as on-the-ground work as a charity. So the website gives hundreds of free routes and free places that people could download to their phones. We've got a sanctuary network of all the places that let people sleep for £10 a night in churches, cathedrals sometimes, parish churches, church halls, village halls around Britain, and there are about 70 of them now. We work with any grassroots communities who want to bring their own land and their own region and maybe even smaller local area to a sort of pilgrimage audience and show off the beauty and sacredness of where they live. And we help them do that. And we're also trying to bring back community events based around parish churches like patronal festivals and Rogation Sunday to bless the land, and also work with pagans and Buddhists and Jews and Muslims also to create routes that connect to those sorts of holy places too. But it's an overall it's a connection with all the different kinds of places that have had devotional practice in. And we're also particularly shifting now away from lifestyle and just, go on a pilgrimage, it's a nice thing to do, towards maybe it's a life transitional moment. You're burnt out, you're depressed, you're going through divorce, you've lost someone you love, that you're maybe getting retired, all these different moments in life, and seeing pilgrimages there. So we're working out ways as to how we can help people realize that's what pilgrimage is good for, because often people take long journeys then. I don't know where it's going, but that's the nature of pilgrimage. And I'm excited. It's growing every year, and we're really, really lucky for this change in time to be happening and to be watching it unfold. And I'll tell you more, obviously.
Thanks, Guy. I think we're gonna start on the presentations now. Is that right, Andrew? So hand back to András.
As you can see on this picture, this is kind of an archetypical picture for me about pilgrimage, because people are going to the church, the sacred site, and they are outside. And I think, to me at least, pilgrimage is important because it's much more integrated as a religious or spiritual act than being inside the church, because then we feel kind of isolated, which is also a good thing and it is purposeful. But pilgrimage integrates our spirituality somehow with our world and ourselves and our life. Actually, this was taken in the city of Esztergom, which is it is the central basilica and cathedral of the Hungarian Catholic Church. Me myself, being a Catholic, I had the opportunity to live in this very nice city for 5 years. And I'm a member of an international Catholic community, which is like a religious order, but we also say we are pilgrims or mountaineers of spirituality because we don't have a monastery. Everybody of us lives on their own outside wherever we can. And as I mentioned, I'm active in various institutions and associations, but I can also address myself as a trailologist. It's a new term we invented a few years ago with the members of the Knowledge Task team of the World Trails Network, because we found that it will be really nice to establish the study of trails as a multidisciplinary field, academic field. So we both put trails into the center of the study, and we are inviting to multiple people, various people from around the world with different backgrounds to this research hub. So that's one of the initiatives I'm very much involved in. And also you see here some logos, which are mainly based in Hungary, and we are working with our association on these initiatives, and the photos which I will bring coming from these pilgrim events or trails. But where is this? As I mentioned, I live in Hungary, and we have a very rich cultural and natural environment here in Central East Europe. As you can see, with the seasons, with the religious heritage, and also it is very much embedded in the culture still, even as we have a secularized world now. The heritage of the religion is still there, and people curate these places and buildings. So it is a very nice opportunity to build on for pilgrimage trails. And actually, besides the hiking trail network, which is really dense in these countries, we are kind of rediscovering, or we have been rediscovering pilgrimage the last 2-3 decades. But it roots back to very ancient times. As you can see, the pilgrimage way to Jerusalem, we know that it was opened after some turbulent times in history, after the Hungarian kingdom was established, and our first king, St. Stephen, opened again and secured the land trail, the land route to Jerusalem through Hungary in 1019 AD. And we also have a lot of shrines, mainly Marian shrines, and the network of the Mary Way was founded in 2006, and I'm also one of the co-founders of the Mary Way network here in Central Europe, but we also have other regional and local pilgrimage trails. If we think about pilgrimage, I think the main two types, or traditional types of pilgrimage, classical ways of how to do a pilgrimage, is either to go in a group or community. Here you can see 5 people, but it can be 50 or 500 or even more. When a specific religious community, usually a parish or a town or a village, heads towards a sacred space, a sacred shrine, for some reason. It is usually related to their own needs or gratitude, or the holy day of the shrine, which is somehow connected to their community. So that's the communal religious pilgrimage, a more traditional liturgical procession-like way of doing it. The other classical way, as we say, is the individual pilgrimage. When somebody, even a small group, but nowadays we usually think about this as an individual, to head on a way. Usually it's a long pilgrimage, maybe multiple weeks, for some individual purpose, some reason. But as you will see, I'm observing there is some movement and there is some change in the way of pilgrimages in the recent years. I would introduce 2 concepts. One is sacredness or sacrality. My English is not my native language, so I'm not always sure about the words, but it's about being sacred. And theologically, it means that God, the divine, the eternal, is the sacred, and whatever we devote to him, like a church, a place, time, objects, or people, it kind of participates in that sacredness, in that perfection of the divine. So, and this is how shrines and sacred spaces evolve, kind of taken out of secular use and devoted to God in some sense. And about the pilgrimages, the pilgrimage takes us to the sacred, more, so to say, more sacred, and we can participate, we can become more part of the sacredness somehow, and it is an encounter in some way. The other aspect I would bring in is spirituality, which is also about encounter, but in not an objective way. So it's not by meeting a place or a time or grabbing an object and so on, but it's inside ourselves, our soul, our relationship with our personal relationship with the divine. And we also talk about communal spirituality, but most of the time it's about a personal thing. And if we think about these two terms, I think we can really see the pilgrimages through these lenses as well. We have founded a series of conferences called the Pilgrimage Academy, and we just had the fifth of this series this year. And one of our models we developed during these conferences is this triangle here. What you can see is that it's a very general symbology. We say that there is the divine, the God, whatever we believe or think about it. And then there is the place, which can be a church, which can be a shrine, but it also can be a normal traditional house or a pilgrim accommodation, whatever place, and a community which is connected to this place. It's kind of their spiritual home. And also, hopefully, they have their own spirituality in relationship with the divine. And then the idea is that into this triangle, the visitor, the pilgrim, arrives and enters, and then we hope that the relationships between the pilgrim and the place and the community and the hosts and the divine will kind of develop on its own. So that's the paradigm we applied here in the Pilgrimage Academy for pilgrimages and visits to sacred sites. And now about a few examples about new ways of pilgrimage or trends in kind of spiritual hiking, so to say, walking. This was founded also by us. It's a hiking day every year. It's called the Palos 70. Palos is the name of the Paulite order, a religious community in Hungary. It was founded by a Hungarian saint. And this is an open day, a 70-kilometer trail. Every year, we organize this day. Either people can join the friars, the monks, for a walking pilgrimage, which is a large group, or they can do the trail on their own, but they will meet volunteers along the trail and get refreshments, get some reflection, like spiritual tasks or opportunities to contribute and think about questions, and also to meet history and other things. So that's a kind of a classical thing. It's either guided or self-guided, but in any case, organized. The other thing is the guided walks. There are specific types, like for school groups. This is the so-called pilgrimage camp, as we call it. It's a national movement now in Hungary. Then we have a Nordic walking retreat guided by a Jesuit priest and a lady who is into recreation and sport. And then it's my way. I guide silent hikes, strips, contemplation, and so we kind of try to observe in nature and also reflect and then share about our experiences. And of course, hospitality is always very, very important in pilgrimage and in these walks. So it's kind of a new type of pilgrimage. We don't necessarily call it pilgrimage, but I think we can call them pilgrimage. And a very important question Andrew tried to ask us from us is that if we go on a long hike, can we name it as a pilgrimage? And it's a very current question, I think, because I would say that although traditionally the shrine is the destination, and it makes the pilgrimage the destination, but of course the way, the path or route makes the pilgrimage more and more, because I think, and then maybe you guys will confirm or contradict, I feel that nowadays for many people the spirituality becomes more important than the religion itself and then the objective expressions of the sacred place. So the route, the hike, the way, the going becomes more important. And I would say what does a pilgrimage mean, and what is just hiking, so to say? It's very hard to answer, but I think one of the key aspects is to say that a pilgrim is somebody who is open for transformation and doesn't necessarily pushes his or her agenda through the way, but tries to be very observant and surrender. And in this case, nature becomes the shrine somehow because it's sacred in some sense if we think of it as the creation. But also we can embed multiple types of places into this realm, like a war cemetery or a riverside or an abandoned monastery, which have significance in spirituality and pilgrimage. And the last point I want to make here is that here, for example, you see a network of short routes, which we say it is a pilgrimage way or a sacred pathway. It's for people to make variations. So there's no single destination. There are multiple places, and then people can walk in either direction. There are some recommendations and there are some content, and that's the most important here, is that in every station you have a block of spiritual content with some questions, some reflection, and so on. So you can really go on an internal way as well. And we are observing in the last years that many people are interested in walking, hiking, and spirituality, but they don't necessarily have the preparedness or the time to walk on multiple weeks. So we try to support people with shorter ways and meaningful ways, even families or other life situations. And this is my fractal model of the pilgrimage. I would say that we can distinguish chronos and kairos, the flowing time and the meaningful time. And the kairos means that there is some change, there is something happening. And the Sierpinski curve as a fractal has in every point a change in direction. So it means for me is that the pilgrim should be or can be open anytime for something to happen along the way. So in the chronos, be attentive for the kairos, which can come anytime. And it's a similar concept what my friend Peter formulated as the pilgrimage 3.0, is that somebody who lives and goes on the way without thinking is a pilgrimage, but at some point becomes a pilgrim because he gets somehow touched by something. So, and the last thing is we have just opened the Pilgrim Center in Budapest, which tries to kind of promote the whole idea of pilgrimage and also the pilgrimage ways and opportunities in Hungary. So you are most welcome to contact us here, and thank you for your attention.
These are just photos that look nice. They serve no explanatory purpose. But who knows? It's an interesting start, isn't it? The Stone Avenue. Right. Walking, I think you can be as artistic as you like with any aspect of your life, and walking is the same as that. People are just immediately go to religious activity for walking, and they think, right, it's medieval Christian, it's between shrines. That is what pilgrimage is. And that is a lovely and really deep and extremely archetypal form of it. But there are, salmon make pilgrimage, swallows make pilgrimage, and we have made pilgrimage for thousands of years. And to say that one of those instances is the most important is well, it's just bias, really. I happen to like it. I do like medieval shrines, but I wouldn't ever say they are the only way. And I think because it sort of stops creativity, and I think let's have another one. There you go. Public right of way. This is taken in lockdown, May time. I think what we're trying to do at British Pilgrimage Trust is help reopen ancient routes across Britain, but we're also not just opening the routes, but actually trying to help people realize that it's a way of attending to the landscapes when coming into relationship with the land and with yourself and those sorts of things. And pilgrimage really is the kind of moment that walking turns into kind of listening, being open to transformation, as András said, and this sort of being no expectations. I think that humility of the journey being able to change you, and a bit like the fool in the tarot. Um, so we promote, as the British Pilgrimage Trust, bring your own beliefs pilgrimage. So you don't need any particular doctrine. There's no conversion agenda. We're not trying to convert anyone to a particular way of doing pilgrimage. We're giving them the options. We're trying to reconnect people to historic roots, invite slower, more intentional walking, and trying to encourage a deeper encounter relationship with the land, with the people you meet along the way, your companions, with the story of the landscape, with yourself, and your body and your heart and your mind and your soul and everything. We work with churches, choirs, farmers, estates, artists, poets, all sorts of different kinds of people, and they're all interested in pilgrimage because we all have land that we want to walk across. We're sort of reviving relationship as opposed to a particular form of pilgrimage. Why it's rising is, well, across Europe, obviously everyone knows the Camino de Santiago, the Via Francigena is increasingly transnational. In Britain, the routes like St. Cuthbert's Way and Old Way to Canterbury and Golden Valley Way and others, we have an article on our website that shows the top 10 routes downloaded last year in England, Scotland, and Wales. So that's actual data of what people actually want, and it's really interesting to look at what people are actually downloading because it's not immediately what you think it would be. Something deeper is happening at the moment. Obviously, everyone's focus right now is on the news and the change in international temperature and weather. But I think there are deeper currents going on underneath all of that anyway, that are sort of more individual, more sort of soul-based as opposed to nation-based. And I think people wanting more embodied meaning. I think in a hyper digital age, we kind of need walking as a kind of analog and yet another analog way of connecting with the world. And lots of young people are just craving it already automatically because they've already worked it out. And I think anyone at any stage can realize that it's a completely different experience to be outside in a moss-covered temperate rainforest with the brooks going side by your side and you singing as the birds sing above you, and that's obviously a different experience to being locked down on your scrolling on Instagram. There's the search for shared vulnerability. There's something about sitting down that means that people don't connect with each other quite as much. When they have coffee with each other, are they going to actually reveal their deeper things as easily as if they go for walking? I mean, we're starting to see walking meetings in general, so I think that's shifting things too. People are wanting to become more connected with the ecology, with they want to have a sort of intimate relationship with place, with the land. It's not just about sort of fixing the land and sorting out political issues. It's also about what do I feel like and how can the land become my friend? One of the questions that was put to us before this is the word pilgrimage being diluted? I don't know. Yes and no. I think people use pilgrimages to go to biscuit factories or like a football stadium or whatever. And I don't want to say to them they can't call it a pilgrimage. I just think that's just a really weird thing to become a kind of arbiter of what pilgrimage is and what isn't. I don't know what right I have to say someone shouldn't do pilgrimage in the way they think of it. People do charity pilgrimages, maybe corporate ones, wellness. And I think what's going on is that people are reaching for this word. They want to go further than a walk. They know that walk's just a bit kind of like an exercise or a bit nondescript, and they want to move towards intention, this openness to transformation, and also this sort of orientation towards something beyond the self. I think that I don't think it's defined, pilgrimage is not defined by faith, it's not defined by how long you walk for or even where you're going. I think it's more about it's this no expectations side. So when you're actually open to the journey changing you, where the ego is no longer the main character in your life, where you're just sort of opening up, surrendering perhaps is another way of putting it. And I think in the walk, listen, and create world, it's all creation is a bit more any like artwork that comes into being. It's the sort of it's a when the process overtakes things, and you sort of surrender to what art is, what's coming from you. Um, that fits perfectly onto a journey where you don't know what's going to happen. So I think people love all of the different aspects of pilgrimage, like the rain coming down and you talking to someone and battling against the elements, and yet you carry on anyway, and then some stranger takes you in and shows you love and you weren't expecting that, and or you go on an unexpected detour away from the path that you think you were going to go on, and actually it shows you something you really needed to see. So it's sort of it's this sort of unpredictability, and in a world where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unpredictability right now, one of the best ways is to choose a kind of conscious vulnerability. So, are there any no-go pilgrimage places? I guess war is stopping some of them now. Climate instability, like pollution, is stopping some places. Some are getting overwhelmed by tourism. So what we think at the British Pilgrimage Trust is that maybe the future of pilgrimage is more local, it's more distributed, and somehow it's like there's more of a give and take with the land. And the World Trails Network is playing a really important role here. That it's showing that they're sort of cultural story holders, these trails, not just kind of walking routes in a kind of abstract exercise way. So I think I mean, I do think that the places matter. I think that when you go to a pilgrimage place, you are actually being charged up by it and in your soul. There's like charging points for the soul, like electric cars have charging points. Maybe your soul needs to be plugged into something and then get. I find it's a bit like that. But it's also not just about the places. It's not just about the node points along the journey. It's also about letting the journey itself open you up in an unpredictable way. You could going over a stile or jumping a fence or gate. You could that may be when you have your epiphany, not just in the grand cathedral. So in general, I see pilgrimage becoming less dogmatic, less right and wrong. This is the way to do it. Um, More about practice. What are you actually doing, rather than what do you believe? Um, Bringing in this idea of less certainty, less sort of absolutely programmed trails. There'll always be people who want to go the programmed trail and know exactly what's coming and not have too much uncertainty. But there are a lot of people who don't just want that either. And people wanting to engage more with the land and the community and nature and helping contributing something back, not just taking. So I think they are this it's all about relationship, listening, and letting the process of the journey take over. These are kind of old things that everyone has said forever. Um, and you need to have a pure heart like the Hobbit, like Bilbo Baggins in Lord of the Rings, that to be a true pilgrim, you have to sort of not really know why you're doing it, what's coming next, as long as you just walk with trust in your heart and purity. Um, you'll be open to great change, and you may hold everything in the world in your footsteps. So yeah, that's my little bit. I will now stop sharing.
I actually can't see anybody now, so if anybody has a question or needs me to stop or something, just speak up, okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Okay, good. Cool. So I actually just want to kind of, for my brief time, pick up on the idea of surrender that both Guy and Andras talked about, and the idea of the journey kind of being charged, and maybe some of the kind of esoteric aspects of pilgrimage practice in my experience and in the experience of some of the artists that I've worked with. I think that and I really want to address the idea of the sort of sensation of walking in community that extends beyond those who are physically present. I think that as we walk these pilgrimage paths and ancient routes, the path itself is resonant with all those who have gone before and all those who will walk in the future. I think that we really sense this in the overtones that echo as our staffs beat the ground. I think that we hear them in the strains of music that kind of enter our consciousness through this sort of sonic reliquary dust that billows up the path. And I think that some describe this as a sense of the presence of ghosts, some describe it as saints, and some just describe it as a kind of ineffable sense of the divine. And this is actually a picture with Guy somewhere along the Canterbury route. So to me, this kind of community that extends beyond temporal boundaries is a really key aspect of pilgrimage practice, which separates it from a long distance walk. The term communitas, which I think Simon probably would have addressed if he were here with us today, is a kind of contested word in pilgrimage studies, and it's often used to refer to the shared experience within a group of pilgrims. But in my work, I'm more interested in what happens when a pilgrim is walking along one of these routes or paths that folks have talked about this evening, or comes into contact with some sacred relic, or puts their forehead against a ruined church and feels the real presence of all those who have come before and visited that place, and all those who will come again in the future. That is to say, it's not so much an experience of communitas within the pilgrim group, but rather a sort of invisible cloud of witnesses or companions. So in my work, I've called this an extra-temporal communitas through culture. And I really think it's the closest that we can come today to time travel. I think that this is also a kind of re-enchanted or theologized or maybe spiritualized approach to psychogeography. And lately I've been revisiting all the stuff that I first cut my teeth on, Derive, Guy Debord, André Breton, and of course, Michel de Certeau. In the 80s, in the practice of everyday life, de Certeau wrote that, quote, "Unlike Rome, New York has never learned the art of growing old by playing on all its pasts. Its present invents itself from hour to hour in the act of throwing away its previous accomplishments and challenging the future," end quote. So as a kid, a student at Sarah Lawrence College in the early 2000s studying studio art and writing and art history, New York was my Rome in a way, the way that that Certeau described it. For me, the streets held all the ghosts of the 80s that Michel de Certeau would have encountered in real time. The romance of punks and goths and the artists of St. Mark's Place, Andy Warhol, Patti Smith, the denizens of the Chelsea Hotel, and maybe even the spirit of Michel himself. So I think that when pilgrims walk through cities and through landscapes, they experience a history both real and imagined. It's a sort of liminal romp through layers of myth and memory to uncover all of its pasts. I think that pilgrims are archaeologists, and they're excavating layers of time and bodies and histories, not with shovels and brushes, but really with a heightened sense of perception and a tuning into the vibrations of space and objects. St. Augustine re-encountered the spirit of his father by holding the ring through which his lifeblood once flowed. And in a totally different time and place, the surrealist André Breton experienced a sort of sense of love and convulsive beauty through an encounter with a mask at a Parisian flea market with his friend Giacometti. The found object, or the trouvaille, is invested with a sense of the marvelous, Breton writes in Mad Love, as one hits on something. And that's the end of that quote. And I'm with Simon Coleman again, who isn't here tonight, but I'm with him in rallying, and also with Guy and András, who spoke earlier, against the sort of, and I'm quoting Simon now, against the rigid characterizations of what is and is not genuine or authentic pilgrimage, and contend that we must widen our horizons and recognize physical, cultural, and intellectual terrains of pilgrimage activity. And that's the end of Simon's quote from his book, Powers of Pilgrimage. I think that the pilgrim path itself is a marvelous object. It's a sort of trouvaille and a travail, the latter, which is the Anglo-French word for both labor and journey. So as someone who works primarily on material culture of religion as it relates to pilgrimage, I can't help but to also signal the transfer of spirit from landscape to objects and souvenirs. I think that routes and trails are spaces and routes where memory and history and spirit converge and become embedded in the vibrant matter, to borrow a phrase from Jane Bennett, of the things that people encounter, take along with them, or even reconstruct. One of the pilgrim artists I've written about a lot in my work is Phil Volker, who's pictured here. He's a woodworker trained in landscape architecture who mapped the Camino de Santiago on his backyard in the Pacific Northwest in the US after a cancer diagnosis. People have come to walk with him in his backyard trail from all over the world, and he really delighted in the dust from everybody's shoes that impregnated his backyard Camino. And at one point during this journey of reconstructing the Camino de Santiago in his backyard, he actually became well enough to take a month off of his chemo treatments, and he went to Spain and walked the Camino there. And he recounted his story of one day when he was walking with a Spanish pilgrim who pulled out a candy bar to share with him and dropped it at the trail. And the pilgrim was like really apologetic and was like fishing around for another candy bar. And Phil felt really compelled to eat the dusty candy bar to, quote, be in communion with the trail and its millions of pilgrims. So I have a lot more to say on that point, but I just really want to underscore that idea of the transfer of spirit from landscape to thing, in this case, cosmic Camino dirt, which is ingested, spread, and breathed in. And I just want to, Chip Sullivan is actually here. I saw him earlier when the group was together. And it's this sort of sense of the spiritus loci that informed Chip and Liz Bolt's recent project called The Wisdom of Place. And for this project, they used the structure of tarot as a creative catalyst to explore the meaning and symbolism of nature-based beliefs and their expression as landscape vocabulary, with the goal of, quote, rediscovering the sacredness of the everyday landscapes around them to shed light on the ecological imperatives of our time. So here I'm showing you the Green Man card, which maps onto the traditional Fool Pilgrim of the Tarot of Marseille. You can see the sun burning at the top of the card, a glow in a wash of yellow flanked by a bearded and mustachioed green man and a green woman above a figure in green leaves and vines carrying a staff and strewing roses into a neat garden below him. It's divided into 4 quadrants in a sort of cruciform pathway. And the accompanying text in Liz and Chip's book begins with an epigraph from Jane Eyre heralding the arrival of spring, and following the following introduction, they write, "Our story of the search for wisdom of place begins with a green man, about to undertake a journey with confidence and faith. He is poised to step off the precipice into the magical realm of the genius loci. The precipice represents the edge of the known world, the border of the regions in which dwell the hidden forces of nature." Liz and Chip, the artists behind the deck, organize spirit walks for people to rediscover the magic and landscapes around them. And the cards provide a sort of introduction to the spirits who inhere such places, all mapped carefully and in a conceptual way onto the tarot deck numbering, which creates a sort of inherent connection to ancient medieval pilgrimage narratives. And I'll stop there if I can. Yeah, and I'm just excited to continue the conversation and especially think about how these sorts of stories and images and encounters of pilgrimage live on in our imaginations and become catalysts for connection across time and space.
Brilliant introductions to both your practices and your life work, I guess, in terms of everything that you've put together in this very short presentation. I'm sure you could delve into your work much deeper.
I've got a question to Chip and Kate actually, because I've really been into the Fool for a long time. Like when I had this sort of realization that that the Fool is the pilgrim, and the opening card of the deck, the beginner's mind, this young man walking off the edge of a cliff with a scrip over his back and a rose in one hand and a dog next to him, just walking off the edge of a cliff, looking really happy about it, is exactly the pilgrim mindset of walking into the unknown, walking into uncertainty, and I've also separately over the last year or two become really, really interested in the Green Man and reading lots of books on it, and and writing an essay on it, and and those two things coming together, I'd never seen, maybe I'm just really sort of behind the times or something, but I'd never seen someone put the Fool as the Green Man. And I just think that's brilliant. And I just want to hear more about it.
Chip, why don't you put you're the one that put the Green Man and the Fool and the Pilgrim together.
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, I think the Green Man, I think, is the embodiment of the kind of mystical qualities of the landscape. That's you can look at Robin Hood as the Green Man. I mean, the Green Man goes like, and it percolates up all over the place. Like I think in England there is a Green Man parade where people dress up like trees and parade down. So, I mean, to me, the Green Man is the personification, not necessarily of the fool, but the person that takes that leap between the known world and the unknown world. You know, going into the unknown world is kind of like in Barbizon, where the artist lived in the city and they went into the woods to be inspired by nature and the unknown. So, I mean, I think it's that leap of faith, and going on a journey, right? A pilgrimage is a leap of you know nothing of what's going to happen. No two journeys are going to be the same. So to me, I think that, to me, they're really they're similar, in a lot of ways. It's just that, taking that leap of faith into the unknown and waiting for the epiphanies.
Wow,
And I'll just say too, if I could jump in, just on a historical note, I've been really interested in the numbering of really old tarot decks and medieval pilgrimage narratives in Europe, including Dante, but also Le Pèlerinage de la Vie Humaine by de Guivy, and also Piers Plowman in an English context. It's really cool because if you look at that sort of Fool card as 0 as the Pilgrim Fool, and if you look at the subsequent cards as the encounters and the major arcana of what he's coming into contact with, all these personified virtues, justice, the devil, he sees an angel, all of these are actually in these medieval pilgrimage narratives almost in the same order, which is really exciting to me. So I've been kind of teasing out what that can mean and how tarot cards can kind of be shuffled and changed. So it's like you have some autonomy over the narrative and you can kind of subvert and change the narrative just like you can on, during a pilgrimage process. And I think the only person that's really said that's really kind of talked about this is Joseph Campbell, wrote an essay about this. He compared the tarot to Dante in an essay that he wrote at the Esalen Institute in the 70s. And I don't think really very many people know about that essay. It's been kind of lost in the sands of time. But just to tie this to my talk, back when I was at Sarah Lawrence, I missed Joseph Campbell. He had died before I was a student, but I did work in his old office, which had been converted into a tea room. So I feel like I kind of like absorbed, that Joe Cam energy during that job, and I've been kind of interested in these sorts of narrative structures and how they relate to these old playing cards ever since then.
that sounds like an amazing. It's almost like Do you know about Planet Narnia and how they've mapped all the medieval cosmology onto the Narnia books? It sounds like you've discovered this kind of secret code of medieval pilgrimage narratives. That's amazing. Well, hope you find it all. I just want to add one more thing about the unknown and the fear and darkness. Um, I did this family constellation therapy. Some of you may know this, you may not. Systemic constellation takes quite a long time to explain, so maybe I'll just keep it simple. But basically, you set up people in a sort of spatial configuration to represent either people like your family members, or in this instance, entities. And we did it with pilgrimage, the concept of pilgrimage. So we had, well, I can't remember all the things, but things like rivers and trees and holy places and the strangers and then we also had fear, the unknown, and darkness. And I was the pilgrim, and in the corner was this sort of fear, darkness, the unknown. They were sort of sitting there looking really sort of a bit more miserable, I suppose. Um, and and I had all these lovely things around me, like rivers and trees and lovely holy places and lovely people and it was like what you imagine pilgrimage to be like. Oh, that's why you do it. But weirdly, my pull, and this was completely felt, all I wanted to be was with fear, unknown, darkness. I didn't actually want to stay in the good bit, and that was so surprising. I was a sort of revelation. that it's almost like a pilgrim is literally drawn to that because that's where the change happens. That's where you go into the scary bits, like going into the woods. Another, in most fairy tales, going into the woods is where the tricky stuff happens.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's also quite interesting, leading back to what you were saying, Kathryn, about those different stages of, if we're talking about the tarot, but that those journeys onto that final transformation. I think András also alluded to those shrines being anchor points where potential transformation, there's all these different potential transformation points along that journey, and it's where you meet those opportunities for transformation. It's very interesting. I think there's a question in the chat. There's a couple of questions about personal intentions for pilgrimage and any examples of transformation. So perhaps if there's any more stories, I mean, this is from speakers or others here in the group who might have had those profound moments, would be interesting to hear.
Example, actually two personal examples which are kind of complementary. One is a very long journey, a long pilgrimage I took more than 10 years ago from Poland to Hungary, about 1 month on walking. And I was trying to kind of review my life and organize it somehow for the future. And I had a huge dilemma in my life at that time. And during the pilgrimage, the dilemma itself was not solved, but I realized that I should go either way because going is the important and not standing somewhere and trying to decide and then just being stuck there. So then I said, okay, I don't know the answer. I will go to a direction and then life will guide me. And the image of that was the rivers. Like you are on a mountain and there is a river starting to the north, but actually it goes around and then it ends in the south. So that was one example I could say. And the other example is just recent. Last year I went to the Camino as a study tour just for a few days, really 4 days. And I didn't have any spiritual intention. I really went there just to observe as a scholar, And then I was kind of grabbed by God, and I got a very deep experience and transformation during that journey. So I would say that regardless of original intention, if you are open, then things happen. So.
I suppose the origin story of how the British Pilgrimage Trust was created was my first ever long walk in my life. And I met this wandering minstrel, and we wanted to take a song back to where it came from. I didn't quite know why I was doing this. I just finished my PhD and I felt a bit lonely and a bit out of connection with nature. So I walked with this guy, Will, he's called, along the river Medway. And we sang the song about people dying in this Rotten Bridge tragedy, over and over again, for 70 miles and 7 days. And then when we finally got to the graveyard, there was a couple standing in front of the monument, and we just said, "What, you haven't been? Where have you been? And why are you here?" And they 10 years ago they tried to find this place. They'd only just found it. They were there for 5 minutes, and it was the monument to the 37 hop pickers that had died and that we were singing about in this song. And we said, "What's your connection with the tragedy?" And they said, "3 of my ancestors died in the tragedy." And then we said, "And have you heard the song before?" And they hadn't heard the song. So we thought we were taking a song back to the place, but we were actually taking it back to the bloodline. And I suppose the transformation side of this was that in that moment I walked away and I sort of felt in my body that what had just happened was seismic for my life, and that whatever the meaning that was created by that, and it was, I don't know, something changed in me in that moment, and I thought, right, we're going to maybe create a pilgrimage, something we're going to bring it back. And we didn't know, we weren't even really calling it pilgrimage at that point because we just called it a song walk until that point, and it was like very artistic in a way, taking a song back to where it came from. That's the intention, but you don't really know why you're doing it. And then it just changed, and I think really that was the big moment of transformation, because then the rest of it's almost been personal transformation for myself, but also trying to open up a movement for everyone else to experience what I just experienced. Um, so it's a bit of a complex thing, the transformation side, because it feels like the transformation, the movement itself is why I'm in action, but I'm also needing to transform myself. And like with any job, you're doing your job because of it. It somehow heals you. There's something in your why you're doing what you do that is what you need to do in your life for your soul. So I'm still discovering now why I'm doing this.
Tamsin says she's lost her voice, so she wants someone to read the question out. So I'll just read that one out at the moment, which says, is there any place for pilgrim as penitent, or the completion of pilgrimage as offering forgiveness, or even the way to heaven anymore? Guy, you take yourself
I
off
don't know.
mute.
I just it's it's a hard one to answer. It sort of depends on how you look at life, really, doesn't it? I mean, sort of, are you, is there something wrong with you that needs to change? Or are we already perfect? Or is it we're somewhere in the middle? Or are do we forgive ourselves before we start walking? Or like I think um I think we maybe have shifted. I don't think that's a very popular view nowadays. If there's anyone on this call who does regard penitence as a really important part of life, I'd be intrigued. Don't know how we can do that without making people feel embarrassed. But yeah, usually maybe something's gone a little bit awry in your life, and you've decided you're going to go on a long walk to try and work things out. You may blame yourself for how things have gone, and you go on a walk to sort of walk out that pain and grief. But I don't think it's the primary reason anymore. I think it can be an interpretation of who you are. And maybe, hopefully, by the end, you just realize that you're part of the divine and that we're all working it out in our own way.
I could just jump in on kind of like with a sort of a historical theological answer as well. I mean, in Catholicism, there's the sacrament of reconciliation where you can go and have your sins forgiven. And a lot of people traditionally do that before they kind of go into the main sort of pilgrimage shrines. So if you go to Santiago de Compostela, for example, there's a whole row of priests that are multilingual, and you can have a chat with them before you proceed down to the crypt to the tomb of St. James. And right now it's a Jubilee year for St. Francis. So the Franciscan route carries, something just fell in the back. The Franciscan route carries a sort of, it's called a plenary indulgence in honor of that Jubilee year. I don't know if András wants to chime in. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that just to give a sort of, again, historical, theological perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting uh, aspects of pilgrimage is that in Christianity, it's not an obligation because you can go to a church and Christ is there embodied according to the Catholic faith because of the Eucharist. So actually, you can go to any church and you do a pilgrimage in your city or whatever. And then, as Kathy said, is the sacrament of reconciliation, which is valid without any pilgrimage. But somehow pilgrimage has become part of Christianity as an optional thing. And these indulgences or absolutions have the theological meaning is that your sins are not just forgiven, but somehow even the consequences are cleared. So, and that's a different theological concept. I don't want to go into very deep, but there is something extra when you do the pilgrimage, when you do the way of the cross. Now it's Lent time and so on. And there are these rules. And basically the theological background of this, and I can connect here with Kathryn about the invisible communitas, or how do you extra temporal communitas, is that the church says theologically that the absolution or the indulgence you get through pilgrimage is because the church promises that he or she will pray for those people who are doing that pilgrimage. So that is the communitas in very large. that the church as a body says, yeah, this pilgrimage is prayed for if you go.
Well, yeah, great. Leanne Bell has a different question. Leanne, do you want to ask the question, or do you want me to read it out? Or
I am interested in, you've been talking about the difference between, I suppose, set pilgrim paths and then maybe this movement into more spiritual wandering, maybe, or with a sort of unconventional endpoint. But I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on, or what is the sort of thinking? What are your thoughts on sort of accrual of meaning into a path? Some of these paths are so ancient and have had so many millions and hundreds of thousands of people walking along them. Is there a sense of that being something important? Yeah, just had some thoughts about that.
Do you mean repeated use and as an individual, or repeated use by individuals that create then a kind of shared collective
I
thing?
think the second, yeah, by different individuals in one route. Well,
I don't know how many people are here familiar with the theory of morphic resonance by Rupert Sheldrake. Some of you maybe. But basically it's the idea that the memory functions across time and space throughout nature, throughout the cosmos, through patterns of a similarity of repeated practice. And that giraffes grow their necks because they're tuning in with all other giraffes that grow their necks before. And rats can do a maze quicker once another rat in some other part of the world has done that maze. And then suddenly in Russia, then suddenly in China, the same maze can be done the same speed. So, and QWERTY keyboards are easier to type on now than they were when they first created, and crosswords are easier to do in the evening after they're published rather than when they're first published, because more people have completed the crossword by that point, so it's kind of contributed to collective memory. So I think ritual and religion is based on this, and I think that's the reason you have such similarity of ritual and why keeping things exactly the same, doing exactly the same liturgy is really important, because then it accrues power, because you are tuning into more and more people who have achieved enlightenment through that, like mantras. The more gurus and enlightened beings that have come through a mantra means if you chant that mantra, it's easier to tune in with what they've done. So it makes it easier to become enlightened. It's a theory. And why wouldn't that also be the same with pilgrim paths? I just assume it would be, that all the people who have had epiphanies along a path, suddenly that gets into the memory of the path.
Ian Nesbitt, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just want to quickly show this. I don't know if you can see that. It's a tarot card of me as a pilgrim. It says Lamat at the bottom, which is the Fool, which is just in front of me on my desk. So I thought I'd share that. But yeah, so I'm an artist and a pilgrim, and I guess I am interested in pilgrimage as a mode of systemic rather than personal transformation, or most likely in my experience both. But yeah, I guess in my practice I'm interested in leaning into that how the work of pilgrimage might what it might have to do with systemic transformation, and I just wonder if anyone would be interested in approaching that.
Oh, I'm doing a pollinator pilgrimage in April, which is about taking lots of seed bombs, and then 100 people are going to walk through East London, and we're going to release lots of seeds in all these different beds to pollinate the land so that they grow loads of wild flowers everywhere. So that's an example of maybe nature restoration pilgrimage, of like actual tangible shifts on the ground, that you actually clean up the rivers or you pollinate the beds and the soil. But it's like the sort of parable of the sowers, I suppose, just putting all the seeds out. But in terms of actual systemic change, I wonder whether firstly we've got to sort ourselves out, and maybe then eventually eventually, if enough people do that, we can shift the system. But actually, to go straight to shifting the system, protest pilgrimage, maybe like in like Pilgrimage of Grace with Thomas Cromwell, like in the Reformation in England, they all got killed for doing it. So I guess, you've had a pilgrimage as protest against the state, as often has been a thing. But is that a pilgrimage in the same way that an individual transformation pilgrimage? I don't know, but I guess that was called Pilgrimage of Grace. So
I think that, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Kathy. Sorry.
I also just wanted to kind of speak to the health and healing, physical kind of benefits of pilgrimage, both mental and physical. And this picks up actually on another question in the comments that we'll probably get to in a moment about how pilgrimages that are done virtually, can still maybe have some effect on folks. And I just wanted to say that in contemplative mysticism, especially if you've ever read like Hugh and Richard of St. Victor from the 12th century, I mean, they wrote about how traversing sacred images with one's eyes can actually have spiritual and physical benefits, or chanting as a kind of sacred journey can really help people feel better. And now there have been various science projects that have been able to take photos of people's brains. The fMRI imagery is so good now that you can actually like look at how the brain is changing when people are on pilgrimage. And it also still works, right? When the brain is being measured and someone is contemplating seriously a religious image. They've also done this with Buddhists who are meditating on compassion or other things, and you could see actually different quadrants kind of lighting up. And the only reason why I'm saying this is because it's compelling to me that that what we're all saying now, that science has caught up with what people have known and what mystics have been saying, since for a very, very, very long time. So I just I don't know if that's really kind of a socio like a sort of social effect, but I think it does it can help our bodies and our psyches, by going on these sacred journeys. And Ian, I love the card. I would like to look at it more closely if I could have a chance to later. And I meant to say just about the Pilgrim Fool that Christophe Poncet is another. I just wanted to register this on the oral audio recording in case Christophe listens, that he's another one that's made some compelling connections between the medieval pilgrim and the fool.
and also Kathryn mentioned about the Glastonbury art collaboration. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
We
do you
were,
want to?
no, we did a collaboration like a few years ago on how artwork has been connected to the different places in Glastonbury, for example. And there may be you may know many of these sorts of things, Kathryn, where artworks have been put onto particular routes.
We started the so-called Living Rosary pilgrimage around the city of Budapest many years ago. And we realized that although the pilgrimage was originally for praying and asking for blessing for the city, actually the act of pilgrimage itself kind of brought people together because, in a city like Budapest, people always try to focus on the center, like things happen in the city center and not in the suburbs. But we actually connected the suburbs with this circular pilgrimage. And then people who were actually neighbors but didn't really talk to each other, neighbor parishes, for example, they were connected by this pilgrimage and they started to meet and welcome each other and so on. So kind of small scale systemic change by the pilgrimage itself and along the pilgrimage did happen during the years. So I think it's also a good example and a direct one.
Yeah, thank you, András. I guess that's the kind of thing that I was hoping to hear about, because I think, systemic change can only be small and can only be local when you set out on it. So yeah, I think that you can behave in a mode of systemic transformation as an individual. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there are still some questions here we haven't touched on yet. If people are happy to keep going. Anne-Marie, you mentioned the Chartres labyrinth. Do you want to?
Yes, no, I'm quite interested in labyrinths, and I just noticed that the image of the Chartres labyrinth that you put up as part of your slideshow, but it also made me think of András's the fractal path, and I wondered if there was some relationship between the labyrinth and the fractal, and what, was it just the idea that you slow down your path and it's for more attention, or is it about not going in a straight line and sort of having this divergent path, and what the meaning of both the fractal path and the labyrinth was in terms of pilgrimage?
Well, it was just, you probably already know about sort of the kind of the mysterious origins or non-origins of labyrinths, Anne-Marie, but I just for those who might not be kind of familiar with it, a lot of times these labyrinths in spaces like the Chartres one, which is actually, it's medieval and it's embedded within the pavement of the cathedral. And no one really knows why it's there, but some people have connected it to these maps of Jerusalem. So this is like a C2 Jerusalem, and you can see that it's in 4 quadrants. And oh, sorry, you can see the 4 quadrants. And labyrinths are kind of, at least the one at Chartres that I showed an image of, are also kind of these sort of 4 quadrants. And actually, do you know what? I just noticed this. This is actually a Boston College Memorial Labyrinth on the next page. This is my my book, and the Boston College one is actually like a 9/11 Memorial Labyrinth. Just speaking about it for peace walks, where people have had really kind of intense emotional experiences of healing following various conflicts, just to kind of pick up on Ian's question. But in any event, so medievalists have kind of tried to find sources and things about, just to kind of try to figure out what labyrinths are really doing in these spaces. I find them very compelling because when you're on pilgrimage, when you get to the site, you can kind of enter into the sacred space or a church, and then there's like sometimes multiple experiences for continued pilgrimage within the site, including labyrinths. And I think that's really it's really beautiful, and it always reminds me of the T.S. Eliot line from Little Gidding, where he says, to make an end is where we start from. That to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. Always makes me think of labyrinths embedded within pilgrimage sites. But anyway, people have also kind of looked at the width of the path, and realized that it's just about the width for a human body. Then kind of positing that they must have really been meant for an embodied experience. And I stood in the center of that labyrinth at Chartres when I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 12. And it was a very compelling experience for me because it really made me reflect on the various journeys, how pilgrimage is really an outward expression of a pilgrimage of life, and connected to kind of cosmology, Christian cosmology of traveling through this world to the world beyond. So I'm a big fan of labyrinths too, especially as they're integrated into various kind of pilgrimages and paths. I didn't know about the fractals, though. I'll have to let András respond to that.
Yeah, actually, the idea is really that the chronos and kairos, so there is the flowing time. So when time is just going, and then there is, so to say, nothing happening, like when you just walk through a forest or a field or something, and then the kairos, when something happens. And then being attentive is being, receptive to those kairos moments. And I think both the fractal and the labyrinth is like you have one single path, and you have to persevere. You have to go ahead. It's not a maze. There are no junctions. There is only one path, and you know that if I persevere, I go ahead, I will arrive. But when and how, that's the question, because sometimes you feel like you are already very close, and then with these zigzag curves, you like end up at the seemingly at the beginning, or the farthest circle again, and then you go again back. So and for the fractal, the idea was really that potentially every moment can become an encounter. And by the way, interestingly, that is infinite. So the fractal path is infinitely long, although although the labyrinth is finite. So we will reach the destination, but it's some more mathematical details. But the idea is really the chronos kairos and the one path, and to have to you have to go.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here because I'm the guy running the clock on this. We're just coming up to 90 minutes. That's quite a long time for everybody. I think what we'll do is I've spotted there are 3 or 4 people who've got questions that they haven't had a chance to voice. I'd like to do those and then sort of then we'll sort of kind of finish it off and invite our 3 panelists to sort of have the final word. Obviously, if there's other questions that are coming up, please continue to put them in the chat. We can feed them back into the conversation, into other events that we're running this year. We're particularly interested to hear from artists and pilgrims themselves that have made journeys, had transformational epiphany, whatever you'd like to describe and things, and share those and invite you to come and be a panelist yourself there. It's a great opportunity to hear more and have the discussion grow more. So please, yes, keep adding things to the chat, but I'm sort of going to go for the 4 that I know about. And so that's Anne de Forest, Jenny Staff, I think it was Ruth, was it, who asked about shamanic pilgrimage, and I think there's, and then William Sharp. I'm going to sort of kind of cut it off there because otherwise I think we're going to be late into the night. So Anne de Forest, you're up first.
Yes, I just I think has been absorbed already in a lot of what has been said, but I found in my experience is that there's so much happens on the in between, and it's the kind of the journey is as important as the destination. But last year I was in Rome during the Jubilee, and I decided to do on my own the Sette Chiese, the 7 churches walk by myself. So I kept interacting with the busloads of pilgrims, but then also following my own route. And it's just what you see and what you notice on the way, as well as when you get to the place, seems just as important and vital and sort of spiritually charged as getting to the place itself. So I was just curious how what other people had to say about that aspect of pilgrimage.
Shall we ask Jenny to talk about her question 2 and then tackle 2 questions at one go? Jenny, do you want to go for yours?
Yes, I'm just interested in the idea because I'm an artist and I've done personal pilgrimages and then walked them with other people. But when it's not possible to walk, I'm playing at the moment with the idea of drawing a line between events or kind of creating rituals and all those things that, and being present with something by kind of stitching or drawing or kind of repeated motions that kind of embody as much walking as I can do because it's not possible. So I'm just interested in that kind of idea as, I'm perceiving it as my own pilgrimage, but I don't know if there's other ideas or examples of that or thoughts on it. So yeah, thanks.
Well, I just on the in terms of Anne, I guess our lives are, James. You don't show James Bond going to the loo, but obviously that's part of his journey. It's sort of, your own life. There's a lot of routine in it, and then there are these big moments where you kind of have the celebrations, the weddings, the birthdays, that sort of thing. But a lot of life is just about the routine, and you can't have one without the other because of the rhythm of everything, the rhythm between in breath and out breath, and it's just sort of parts. If you just had one hit after another in like loads and loads of really important, it would just be weird. It would just be too much, I think, too much to handle. And so it's about being able to breathe, I think, and process. It's about practice rather than the whole practice. I mean, I think this is a question that comes up, but I don't think it's answerable. Personally, I think it's just obviously both to me. But
Yeah.
maybe really hardcore theologians would say it's only once you've got to the cathedral, but that'd be quite a strange, pretty extreme view, I'd have thought.
Anyone respond to Jenny? Or we'll just leave it in the air and we'll come back to another time. Ruth, you made a question about shamanic journeying.
Yeah, I just wondered if anybody looked into shamanic journeying as a kind of pilgrimage. I mean, when you go on a shamanic journey, you start off at the Axis Mundi, which is the place where the real world meets the third world, and I mean, that is, I know it's not actually walking, but it is walking in your mind. So I wondered whether it was included in any texts or.
And Will Sharp, William, do you want to say your
and make sure we end on a wrong note? My perverse nature couldn't prevent me from or encourage me to just ask the question about misguided pilgrimages or pilgrimages that are taken for the wrong reason or by the wrong people, or satirical pilgrimages and so on. So in the comments, I alluded to Conrad's Heart of Darkness, where he talks about the ivory hunters as pilgrims. But I'm also thinking about T.S. Eliot's Murder in the Cathedral, where at a crucial moment, one of the characters, and I can't remember which one, says, "This above all else, the worst treason, to do the right thing for the wrong reason." And I think that it might be possible, just because we've been talking about it from such a favorable point of view all evening, to consider that there may be people taking pilgrimages that other people think maybe they shouldn't be doing. Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress, he was in jail most of the time that he did the writing. So therefore, some authorities thought that his whole idea of pilgrimage was misguided. So it seems to me that while individuals undertake pilgrimages for personal benefit, collectively speaking, in other words, viewed from the outside world, there may be people doing things, or large groups of people doing things that other people think are just not the right thing to do, either because they're trampling the grass, carving their names in trees, whatever else, or whether there's actually something really pernicious and greedy or hypocritical about the activity.
I mean, Guy and I, as Guy said, together we worked on this version of the Glastonbury pilgrimage, and it's both, I mean, there's multiple ways that people can be involved with this. They can actually go and walk the route, and we paired up with some of the organizations like who are folks who are saving sites like Bridget's Mound, but you can also kind of do it virtually. And one of the places that we suggest visiting is the Glastonbury Thorn, which is, has been completely covered over the years with so many plastic accoutrements, but flags, duct tape to it. And this comes from an old tradition of clootie trees, where pilgrims would have a bandage on a body part that was injured, and then they would dip the bandage in water that was water associated with a saint, like a saintly well. And then, they would tie the rag onto a tree, and it would just sort of decay over time. And when the rag decayed, the healing would be complete. But unfortunately today that's become, tying non-ecological items and leaving things kind of all over pilgrimage paths. And it has actually become a nuisance. There's people that have written about the pollution along the Camino de Santiago, toilet paper everywhere. It's kind of awful. But maybe Guy can speak to this, because he has a great idea about singing, again, in communitas, with all the spirits of the place, to that place as a kind of non-environmentally damaging act of thanksgiving, and as a sort of ex voto for the pilgrim who kind of comes into contact with a sacred piece of nature or site.
Gosh, thanks, Kit. I've completely forgotten that was something I decided to do once upon a time. I'll now use it again after years of not using it. Well, I think well, in the case of the Glastonbury thorn, it's actually got chainsawed to the ground. So it doesn't get much worse than that, really, that the holy tree was literally destroyed by a couple of vandals. And then but the good thing about it is because it's so important, they grew another one, and and so that's now growing and starting to flourish. So that's sort of death and renewal. And I think, again, this in breath and out breath, you can't really have one without the other. You have to have people desecrating it in order for it to be sacred. There's somehow like it by the, and then being cleaned up, and then it's sort of, there's always that fight between those two forces in the world, I think. I don't think you can get rid of it. I mean, if you create a beautiful thing with a lot of light, it's going to attract darkness to it. That just always happens in everything, and does it in pilgrimage too. And actually, to be honest, it's like with pilgrim groups, there's always one person that is slightly difficult, and that's because in society there are difficult people in every community, in every group, and so it's a little bit like that. Actually, welcoming everyone means you to get people who are not going to respect it, and that is part of life, which is part of what pilgrimage is opening you to, which is life itself. So yeah, I mean, that's maybe a little bit too relativist as an answer, but I don't know how you can stop it. And so it's all about surrendering even to that, surrendering to the ghetto blasters with like the French school kids, like playing their music really loud in Santiago. Like, it's not fun, but it's part of the journey. It's somehow just part of it.
Yeah, that goes back to what you said earlier about policing people's purity as they do the pilgrimage. Listening to all the definitions of pilgrimage, the only one that I could come up with that seemed to work for everything was intentionality. It has to be some sort of journey, metaphorical or real, and it has to have an intention behind it. But that's exactly what Conrad said in Heart of Darkness. He said, an idea alone redeems it, and talking about the project of Western exploitation of Africa. So, and bringing Christianity to the heathens and so on and so forth. So we have intentionality, and so you can't really kill the idea of pilgrimage, but what you can do is sort of recreate it. So Martin Luther said, well, we can't have pilgrimages as the Catholic Church does it because they're promising things that they should not be promising. It's all about sale of indulgences and so on and so forth, and getting out of jail, getting out of hell free cards. But really, he said, it's okay, though, if you want to go to Rome and learn things and educate yourself. So he killed the pilgrimage as something that was going to help you in the afterlife, but he said it could be very useful in this life. So either way, there are benefits. There are benefits to pilgrimage, but also there are conflicting views about what constitutes a good intention behind the act of pilgriming.
Okay, I think on good intentions, we'll probably end it there. But I'm going to invite the panelists to have a last word. Lora and I haven't let Lora speak for a few minutes, so Lora also should have a word as well. What we're going to say, okay, is that we really want to continue the conversation. It's really enriching. This has been a really good start. So a big thank you to Kate, to Guy, and to András for their presentations and coming along with their discussions and really responding to the conversation that's being developed. So thank you for that. And I just need to flag up that we are actually running a poetry competition on pilgrimage at the moment. Also, if there are people still in the meeting who've made work and they would like to add it to our archive and put it into the collection Pilgrimage Resources, then we would love to have that happen. So please look into that. And our next event that we've got coming up is titled loosely Sacred Paths. It's around more about activism, pilgrimage as activism. And that's coming up on the 7th of April. But we're going to go, three panelists have the last word, and Lora, you're going to have the very last word. Is that okay, Lora? Good. Okay, András, your last word. Is he gone? Has he gone already?
No. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now hear you. Yeah.
So yeah, I will make 2 points briefly here as we talk about wrong pilgrimage or right pilgrimage or whatever. just came to my mind to say that there is a temptation for pilgrims to think they are kind of superior because they are not just touring, but not only touring, but it's a pilgrimage and I am a pilgrim, and then people feel sometimes entitled. So I think that's a real temptation, and I think we should try to become humble pilgrims. If we observe this, then we probably need to do more pilgrimage, or I don't know. And the other thing which leads to even further is that I'm referring to Karl Jaspers, who had this triad of false realities, so to say. It's good to think about and to experience that we can surrender to something beyond ourselves, but it's very important, I think, not to construct that reality, and to try to be really open to the real transcendence. And of course, it's a good practice to go beyond ourselves first, but I think the question is always whether we really reach the transcendent, or are we just constructing our own realities? I think it's an important point. And thank you very much for today.
Guy, your last word.
I want to focus on places and practices and how pilgrimage can be to a church, a cathedral, a mosque, a temple, a synagogue, a gurdwara. Those are the human-built places, but it can also be to an ancient tree, a holy well, a river source, a stone circle, a cave, an island, a waterfall, a labyrinth. And the Axis Mundi concept of the shamanic journey, and that Chartres labyrinth where the square, the cross meets the circle, is heaven meeting earth, and the creation of these Axis Mundis is really important. And I'd say the practices are lighting candles, drinking wild water, singing, lying down on the floor, looking up at the beautiful ceilings, touching your forehead against the east wall of a church, bathing in a river, meditating in a cave, like spending time on an island away from things, crashing a waterfall over your head. Like, it's about how you engage with these places. What do you do when you're actually there? Not just to look at them, but to how am I going to most engage? And that's the creative act for me. That's where you become an artist, is when you are basically playing with the place in such a way that it gives you more meaning and you come into greater contact with it.
Thank you. And Kate?
Difficult to top that. I agree with what Guy said, and I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to kind of pick up on some of these ideas of art making as pilgrimage. I'm excited about some of the things going on in the chat with Jenny and Tamsin, because I spend a lot of time talking and writing about artists and having dialogical encounters about how their work, which often incorporates elements of the landscape, such as anointing things with water, finding bits of wool from a sacred hill in Ecuador and incorporating it into a textile, how all of these things really carry that resonance with place that Guy is talking about, and how we as viewers or people experiencing these artworks can enter into the experience of communitas with these artists. So I think that will probably come back again in some of the later summer sessions. So I'm excited to kind of continue the conversation, and I really just want to wish everybody a buen camino.
Brilliant. Laura, you're going to have the last word, and then we'll close it off.
Yeah, I just want to say good evening, good afternoon, good morning to wherever you are situated. As we, well, here in England, will transcend now to bed. But I would just want to offer 3 words, I think, that I felt sum up, the conversation. 1 being transformation, 2 being embodiment, and 3 emanating or communitas to the community. So I think, we're kickstarting this this series with those three words at the forefront, and I feel like, you know, what will we do and how will we continue this conversation? So I hope to see you all back at the next one so we can expand our processes and networks. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks everybody. And